Welcome to the WIHS Journal. I'm Jack Pike, your host for this program, and today I'm delighted to welcome to the microphone Peter Wolfgang, who is the Executive Director of the Family Institute of Connecticut. We are going to discuss the various ethical, social, and legal issues in Connecticut that impact the public, especially families and the church. We will retrospectively look at 2024 and FIC's critical role in this, but also looking forward to what we may be able to expect during the legislative session, which begins in early February. So, Peter, great to have you, and thank you for being here.
Jack, it's so good to be back on WIHS Journal. Thank you for having me. I cannot imagine the work we do without the partnership between the Family Institute of Connecticut and WIHS. This station is such a mainstay of the body of Christ in central Connecticut, and we are so much better for it. So thank you to you and to everyone at WIHS.
And thank you for all the work you and Leslie do at FIC and the rest of the people who work with you. Actually, it was a pleasure to attend the banquet a few months ago and see really significant large number of people who take these issues seriously. And to hear Eric Metaxas, speak, that was really, really good. So, but I wanted to at least start maybe with a little briefly history about FIC and the mission in Connecticut has done as well as when you came into it.
Sure. So the Family Institute of Connecticut has been around now for over 35 years. It just celebrated its 35th anniversary last year. Family Institute of Connecticut was founded in 1989 by a group of evangelical clergymen in the Windsor area. Some of you may know the Reverend Earl Imsweiler. He's been around for a long time. There were many others. Rich Kendall, who is an Eastern Orthodox layman, and several other people from a variety of different denominations and communions. And we are loosely affiliated, the proper word is associated, with Focus on the Family. This, of course, is the evangelical Christian ministry out of Colorado Springs that was founded by Dr. James Dobson, who is a child psychologist and also a Church of the Nazarene pastor. And he founded Focus on the Family in the 1970s to fight what was already then the crisis in family life and marriage in the USA, coming off of the 1960s and the age of Aquarius and all that. And by about the end of the 1980s, Focus on the Family realized that a lot of these battles were going to be won or lost at the state level in state capitals. So they encouraged the creation of what are called family policy councils. So the acronym for Family Institute of Connecticut is FIC, and FIC is one of the FPCs. Family policy councils exist in about 40 of the 50 states. We are the one for Connecticut. We are all autonomous and independent, responsible for raising our own funds, but we are all sort of loosely networked together with Focus on the Family as the mothership. And Alliance Defending Freedom, ADF, is our de facto legal arm. Family Research Council is our de facto Washington arm. And there's also another entity called Family Policy Alliance that is the link that networks us all with each other. So when you hear about the pro-family movement or, in the eyes of the media, the dreaded religious right, that's us. We are that for the state of Connecticut.
Yeah, and I think that you have played such an amazing role in the years that you've been executive director of that. And like I said, one of the reasons that I wanted to do this today and maybe in the future to continue this is to let the public, and at least in Connecticut, know, and my own colleagues know in medicine about what is going on in the state, and not to be ignorant about what it is, and to be involved. So looking at what took place this year, I was, again, as I said to you, I looked at your the video that you had made about what took place in 2024, and kind of went down the list of the things that you had worked against. And again, the things that we're talking about now that you guys addressed in 2024, there's a very good chance that in some form, these things are going to come back. I mean, like assisted suicide, it goes away for a year or
Right.
we would defeat it, but they come back. And so I think many of these things that we're going to talk about will come back. So the first thing that you had talked about was the Let Kids Be Kids conference.
That's right. For many years, and we're very fortunate in that you referenced Leslie. For listeners who don't know, Leslie is my wife, Leslie Wolfgang. Peter Wolfgang, I've been the executive director of the Family Institute of Connecticut now for, it will be 18 years in July. A couple years ago, my wife, Leslie, we actually met in law school. We're both attorneys. We met at UConn Law in the 1990s. We're both Connecticut natives. And a couple years ago, Leslie became our director of public policy. And ever since Leslie, and we're a small operation, there's only 2 full-time employees and a handful of part-timers. Leslie's actually one of the part-timers. But ever since Leslie became the director of public policy and one of our lobbyists up at the state capitol, what we've been able to do at Family Institute is kick up our game. Up until about a year ago, almost everything we did was reactive. And if you're on FIC's emails, if you follow our website, you'll hear us talk every year about victories. We won on this, we won on that. All those victories, unfortunately, because we're behind enemy lines in Connecticut, it's a deep blue state with all that implies culturally. I don't mean that as a partisan statement. I mean that as a sort of cultural, sociological statement. It's a very socially liberal state. It's a state that oftentimes is very hostile to biblical values. So Family Institute, we've charted out quite a record of success, but all those successes have been on defense. They've all been reactive. And what Let Kids Be Kids is for the first time, we get to go on offense where we're the ones setting the agenda, seizing the initiative, and getting everyone else to react to us. What it is this. Many of your listeners, I'm sure, are familiar with gender ideology, with the transgender way of looking at things that unfortunately has invaded the public schools here in Connecticut as well as the nation. It was an issue that was very much in contention in the political process last year during the elections. What interests us is the way it's playing out on the grassroots level with the schools here in Connecticut, because what we have learned is that in Connecticut, a lot of times the public schools are hiding a child's desire to transition from one gender to another from the parents. They're like actually being complicit in it. They're aiding it and they're hiding it from the parents. So what Let Kids Be Kids is it's a project to try to pass a law requiring schools to work with parents, to notify parents. Nobody is going to love that child more than that child's own parents. The school can't do that. The state can't do that. In fact, the state has no business coming between a child and her parents on something that important, that intimate. 100 years ago in 1925, there was a U.S. Supreme Court decision, Pierce versus Society of Sisters, where the U.S. Supreme Court said, very famous line, Jack, the child is not the mere creature of the state. Well, jump ahead 100 years later, and the state of Connecticut, through our public schools, is treating the child as if he or she is a mere creature of the state. We saw this with DCF, the Department of Children and Families. Leslie discovered that their website had some information inviting children to report their own parents to the state if their parents did not affirm their desire to be the opposite sex or something other than the sex they were born. We exposed that. DCF pulled that off of their website. But these sorts of things are going on everywhere. And what we want is some sort of comprehensive solution that forces the schools. We're not trying to be against the schools or against the child. This is not about targeting the child.
You have been listening to part 1 of 3 journal segments from my discussion with Peter Wolfgang, Executive Director of the Family Institute of Connecticut, as we are talking about the many ethical and moral challenges facing Christian families and the public at large in the state of Connecticut. We will continue with this discussion next time. If you need further help with this information, you may call WIHS during our business hours, 9 to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday, at 860-346-1049. The opinions expressed are of the participant and not necessarily the staff or management of WIHS. I'm Jack Pike for WIHS News.